going to talk about sex, right? That subject that you sort of found yourself, sort of plummeted into after wanting to be a singer, and which I think is really camp. Just imagine you could be singing at your seminars or something like that.
I could be like the Barbara Streisand of the sex world.
Good to hear you said Barbara Streisand rather than, any others. But let's talk about sex. Let's specifically talk about sex and lesbianism, because you must have come across quite a few lesbians out there or know a little bit about, the mystique that is lesbianism and lesbian sex and the, lesbian bear death and all that stuff that happens and why lesbians can't have sex like men, like gay men.
Well, I think, look, there's a lot of kind of ideas about what that is. What my estimation of it is more, I think a lot of it has to do with conditioning to a degree. But then I also think there is, something fundamentally different around, is it the sex drive of women, whether they're gay women or straight women, that there is, we've tried to have beats for women and we've tried to have sex clubs for women, and they just never take off in the same way that they do for dudes. And this is across the world, not just in Australia, which leads me to believe that there is something inherently different, I guess, about women's desire for sex, that I think they still have as much of a drive as men do, but there is also a requirement for some kind of connection. And I don't mean necessarily like loving me, you and me together forever kind of connection, but there needs to be some kind of at least a conversation or something that happens that engages to that degree. Of course there are going to be women who are going to go, no, that doesn't apply to me. I know. I'm not saying everyone, all of us, no, I'm not saying that. But in general, we're talking generally, that is the thing that I think really does distinguish men from women around their sex drives, is something to do with connection. I'm not entirely sure, but it appears to be that. And certainly when I have lesbian couples clients come to see me, it's often actually more around re-engaging their libidos and re-engaging their desires, because often they get very, very caught up in lots of processing and lots of talking and what does that mean and what does that mean, and and they're really great to work with in terms of processing deep, complex emotions. It's fabulous. They often will go very, very deep. But what can happen on the flip side is that there's so much processing going on and not much fucking, and we really need to sort of redress that balance in that case. Whereas sometimes what I find with gay men is that it's often all about the fucking and not enough about the communication. So it really is about that finding that delicate balance, and I'm not suggesting that it needs to be 50-50 either. There is something inherently sexy about things being a bit off-kilter that actually I think is what is the essence of desire, is things being slightly out of balance makes a sense of friction, which makes things sexy. But what can happen sometimes is that when people get too secure in their relationships, the libido can drop off a little bit. So it's about finding that balance between the eroticism and the security of the, here we are together in our onesies watching telly, which is really, really lovely, but not so sexy.
Not so sexy. And, I find it terribly unsexy that, sometimes you go into a cafe and you see two lesbians sitting there and they're over a latte and you just know they're discussing something really deep and meaningful. Yeah. And I've always been, not the world's most successful lesbian, because I can't be bothered with that stuff,
Okay.
And it's interesting what you're saying too about women, unlike men. I've actually been in one of those, women's play areas at a dance party, and honestly, you might as well have taken War and Peace to read, because there was just, and I noticed this thing about women picking up, like there was a chair at the front of this room, and they'd sort of meet at this chair, have a little chat, have a little snog, and then walk out hand in hand.
Right.
And my comment was, furniture tomorrow, that thing, which is really stereotypical, I know, but it's still very, very fun. And I find that very funny about lesbians, that, there is this, oh yes, we need to talk about this, whereas I'm more, oh no, let's go out there and root, what I mean, it's sort of something different. So, I mean, everybody is so totally different when it comes to sexuality. And another thing too, I remember I think it was in the 90s, where we had this terminology, luggage, that if anybody was a little bit edgy or something like that, you say that I find very sexy, that automatically, I know you've got luggage, can't go out with you.
Okay.
You know, and it was really detrimental. I used to think, well, wait a minute, we've all got something that's happened that's brought us to where we are today.
Well, absolutely. You can't get past 30 and not have a history.
No.
Everyone's got a history. I think with that, though, it's about how well your luggage is packed. You know,
Absolutely.
if you're going to have
good
stuff
term, actually. Can I use that?
of course you can. You know, if your stuff's going to be hanging out of your luggage all over the place and messing up everybody's house, you can't have that. But have your luggage, but just have it neatly packed and know what's in there. That's okay.
Absolutely, and it's sort of. But I find that in the lesbian community, and I think sometimes in the gay in the boys community, I'll use an example. I was at the Peel one night, and I noticed that every time the door opened, all these guys turned around and looked at the door. And I said to my friend, I said, "Oh, you guys, you know, you're looking at him. You know, is he the next best thing?" And my friend said to me, "No, everybody's looking for their knight in shining armour."
Yeah,
and it sort of brought me that's the dog Mushka. It's sort of that's her roast chook. And it really pulled me up because I started to look at men a little different. Like, you know, I have men that are in long-term relationships. But it pulled me up thinking, well, not men are looking for that. As you know, gay men are as everybody else is.
Yeah, well, I think that we've all of us are brought up with this story that, you know, that there is someone for everyone and that at some point we're going to meet the one. And, you know, the idea of soulmates and that kind of thing. And I think that's lovely, and certainly we see a lot of evidence of that. But I also think that the idea of the one is a little bit misguided. I think there are ones, you know, and through your life you will meet different people who will rock your world at different stages of your evolution, of your level of embodiment. And somebody, if you're with them for 2, 3 years, minutes, months, whatever, that they serve that purpose for you in that time. And if a relationship lasts a year, 2 or 3 years, it's not a failed relationship. It's lasted for the duration that it was supposed to last. I think we're all sort of looking for that sense of kind of coming home, and we think that someone else is going to give it to us. And this is throughout history, philosophically. People have yearned for that sense of, you know, whether it's going to God or going back to the mother or going back to the earth. There is that sense that we on the earth are not quite whole.
Yes.
And that really plays out in sexuality. So, we can become very attached to the idea of finding our other half. And that's okay, except for when it ends up preventing us from being all of who we are, because we're constantly looking outside of ourselves for reassurance that we are okay. When we can find that reassurance in ourselves, we have more to offer another person because we are already a complete being. And we can share ourselves with one or more people, even at the same time. Because we are, you know, self-contained enough to be able to trust that things are going to be okay. This is a very sort of, I guess, almost advanced level of Buddhism that I'm talking about here.
I was going to say that because, you know, in that, you know yourself, you know, as the Buddha said, you know yourself, love yourself, because then, you know, you can love others and respect others in a pure fashion. Because I was going to ask, you know, just very, very briefly, because this is one subject that, you know, or topic or subheading that can bog us down.
I love you.
How much
I do love you.
How much do you think religion, even though somebody isn't religious, how much do you think that plays with our sexuality?
I think it plays with it a lot. So, and it's because it's infused in our culture. So even a person who is not religious is still at the mercy of laws that are informed by religious values. So, for example, the fact that we don't have gay marriage in Australia, and I know that that's a topical thing, some people are pro, some people are not, even within the community, that's fine. But the whole reason that we don't even consider it to be a valid form of relationship is because the law is influenced by religious values. It's a moral judgment. It's got nothing to do with, you know, economics or anything reasonable. It's just because somebody somewhere who has a bit more power than you and I decided that that's okay, but that's not okay. And that's informed through religious morality. And same with, again, with women's reproductive rights. All of these kinds of things are governed solely around the notion of someone's path being more valid than another's, and that's not fair and it's not okay.
And there's no way that you can break that down. I mean, really, in essence,
Look,
I mean, it's going to take such a
yeah,
long time.
It is so indoctrinated into our culture that we don't even know that it's there. Again, it comes back to that way that we were looking at to the way that we still understand women's sexuality as being this thing that's mysterious, and the way that women are described as these mysterious kind of, you know, wanton sex creatures, and even homosexuality is still considered other or abnormal in some way in certain pockets of the community, because it's not, you know, what God intended, even though, you know, really, none of us are especially religious. I'm not, you're not. But we can't help but be influenced by laws that tell us this form of sexuality is okay, but that form is less than okay. And this has been going on for thousands of years. And it's up to individuals and projects like this to help us break that stuff down.
And it's always confused me because, you know, I was brought up very freely when it came to religion, and you know, I was the sort of kid at school, you know, one year I was, you know, a Christian, next year I was a Buddhist, another year I was a Muslim, just to get out of religious instruction because it bored me above everything else. And I think, you know, it was like, well, you know, this is all just a load of, you know, bollocks basically.
Right.
But you know, it's incredibly sad that happens.
Yeah.
You know, and it breaks my heart at times, especially when it does come to our community, what's being inflicted upon us. So let's move on.
I'm working on a project called the Atlas of Erotic Anatomy and Arousal, and that is a 4-part educational series, but you know, adult education around helping people understand how their anatomy works from a sex and pleasure perspective, not from a reproduction perspective. So a lot of us, when we do get taught anatomy at school, it's at school, and you know, teachers and all that kind of weird stuff, or parents are trying to tell us, and that can make us feel a bit uncomfortable as well. And it's often taught to us through the filter of reproduction, except that most folks, when they go to have sex, they're not doing it to have a baby. They're doing it for a bunch of other reasons. And so that is the premise through which I teach, is from the pleasure perspective, from the perspectives around why we have sex in the first place. So the anatomy project is designed to help people understand how their bodies work from a sex and pleasure perspective, and how to get more pleasure out of their bodies, especially if they haven't had a lot of experience or feel like they would like to understand more about what's possible just by understanding how their body works in ways that are kind of meaningful and relevant to them.
And even that power of negotiation, you know, like, you know, I think we've all been to bed with someone saying, oh no, don't touch me there because that's where this evil old man touched me, you know, when I was, you know, 17 years of age. Oh, okay, I know not to touch your left forearm from now on, you know, that sort of stuff. Cyndi, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for sitting on the lounge. But I have one question to ask you. If you was to be stranded on a desert island, what would be the one thing you could not live without, and the one thing you would have to take with you?
Oh, Lindsay, I have to say it would be my vibrator.
Oh, can I ask why?
I've got to keep myself healthy, you know. I've got to practice what I preach.
So that when you pick you up, you know, even more, you go, woohoo, I'm at the time of my life.
Exactly. I think I'm going to take my vibrator to the grave with me.
Oh, fantastic. If I may say, and not me, Bill, I'm really looking forward to your funeral. we all pop one in.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing to do.
But Cyndi, it's been an absolute delight having you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching prideTV.com.au, and Mushka will be interviewing her one day, I'm sure, when I learn Fluid Dog. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Glow, for making this segment possible, and everybody take good care.